Hello everyone, it's Scott and we're back for Final Fantasy Day 3 previews. We only got a few cards from the main set today, but we did get the rares from the starter deck, so we'll talk about those briefly as well. But before we dive into those previews, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy preview season and beyond. And remember, if you're looking for cards from the set, you can check us out on the web at caffeinatedgamers.tcgplayerpro.com. Alright, so let's look at today's previews. So first we got Ultima, Origin of Oblivion. For 5 mana, you let your creature that's a god for 4 with flying. Whenever Ultima attacks, put a blight counter on target land. For as long as that land has a blight counter on it, it loses all land types and abilities and has tap for colorless mana. Whenever you tap a land for colorless mana, add an additional colorless mana. So if you do this to your own cards, your own lands, you're going to make them so that they produce 2 mana. So I think there's potentially an upside with that if you're going to, play in a deck where you really are mana hungry. But because Ultima costs 5 mana, I mean, you'd have to be able to sneak them out early for that really to make a difference in the game. So I'm not sure how playable this is going to be in standard, but it might be a good sideboard option against decks that are running a lot of non-basic lands, because this is a way to shut off those basic lands or those basic lands and non-basic lands on your opponent's side, particularly if they really are relying on a particular color of mana to play the game. Our second card of the day is Mazu Trader. For 3 and a black mana, you get a Fish Citizen. That's a 3/4, and when this creature enters the battlefield, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token. So a little bit of ramp there. And whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, Surveil 2. So I think more this is a limited card. We're not going to probably see any play in standard. Next, we've got Theater Ship Prima Vista. For 4 and a blue mana, you get a legendary artifact vehicle. That's a 5/3 with flying. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if 4 or more mana were spent to cast it, this vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, and its crew cost is 2. So again, maybe a limited playable card, probably not going to see standard play. Alright, and our last new card from the main set is Zidane, Cheerful Thief. For 3, a red and a white mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human mutant scout and is a 3/3. And when Zidane enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it, it gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. And whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent you control, create a treasure token. So you get a treasure token when you give it back to your opponent. I could see this potentially as a sideboard card in an aristocrat style deck where you've got the ability to take it, benefit from the card, and then sacrifice it on your turn before you give it back to your opponent. But outside of that, I don't think it's going to see much, if any, standard play. Alright, so let's move on to the cards we got from the starter deck. So first is Rosa, Resolute White Mage. For 4 mana, legendary creature that's a human noble cleric, 2/3 with reach. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains lifelink until end of turn. If this was 3 cost, I think it would be fine, but for 4, it's a little bit overcosted for what it does. Next, we've got Beatrix, Loyal General. For 6 mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human soldier and is a 4/4 with vigilance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of equipment you control to target creature you control. So again, probably, obviously Beatrix wants to be in a equipment deck, but again, 6 mana is a little bit overcosted for what Beatrix is offering. Next, we've got Judgment Bolt. For 3 and a red mana, you get an instant. Judgment Bolt deals 5 damage to target creature and X damage to that creature's controller, where X is the number of equipment you control. So I could see this actually seeing a little bit of standard play if We have a dedicated equipment deck. So you're paying 4 mana to do 5 damage to a creature, and then you've got 4 or 5 equipments on the field, and you're doing that same amount of damage to your opponent. So I think under those circumstances, it has an outside chance of seeing some standard play. But outside of that, it's really just going to be part of those starter decks. Next, we've got Lightning Security Sergeant for 2 and a red mana. You legendary creature, that's a human soldier, and is a 2/3 with menace. And whenever lightning deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card as long as you control lightning. So this is actually the card that I think is probably going to be most playable, because it's got menace, and when you do combat damage to your opponent, you get to exile a card from the top of your library. So, conceivably, you could do that every turn, and then you're getting, in essence, an extra card draw in red, which we don't see a lot of on cards right now. So Lightning's got an outside chance of seeing some standard play under those circumstances. Next, we've got Deadly Embrace for 3 and 2 black mana. You get a sorcery where you destroy a target creature an opponent controls, then draw a card for each creature that died this turn. Again, limited playable in the starter deck. Outside of that, we're not going to see it. Next, we've got Ultimecia, Temporal Threat for 4 and 2 blue mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human warlock and is a 4/4. When Ultimecia enters the battlefield, tap all creatures your opponent controls. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So nice abilities there. I wish it was a mana less, then I think it would be playable in standard. But at 6, it's going to be hard to make this playable. Next, we've got Zandi, Dark Mage for 2, a blue and a black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human wizard and is a 3/3 with menace. And Zandi gets a +1/+1 counter for each non-creature, non-land card in your graveyard. So, or gets +1/+1, not a counter. So this is, again, in the right build. This has some standard playability. But again, are our graveyard decks going to want this card? The answer is probably no, but it is a nice ability for those kinds of decks where you've got, kind of a more of a Dimir Spellslinger style deck where you've got a lot of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard. But outside of that, I don't think it sees standard play. Next, we've got Seymour Flux for 4 and a black mana. You legendary creature that's a spirit avatar and is a 5/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 1 life. If you do, draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Seymour Flux. So this has, again, a little bit of outside chance of seeing standard play. Again, this one has a little bit of outside chance of seeing standard play because, drawing a card each turn for 1 life, putting a +1/+1 counter on Seymour Flux. Okay, those are decent abilities, but again, we've got currently better 5-drops than standard, so I don't think it's going to see play. But again, it's one of those that has a little bit of an opportunity too. All right, and that brings us to our last 2 cards from the starter decks. And that's Majestic Scythe for 4 mana. You get an artifact that's an equipment, a test of your reflexes. When this equipment enters, you may attach it to target creature you control. If you do, that creature gains first strike until end of turn and must be blocked this turn if able. Equipped creature gets +2/+1, and then the equip cost is 2. So really nice enter the battlefield trigger where you get to attach it and it gets first strike. But again, it's 4 mana and you're only getting +2/+1. So probably not standard playable because of that. Our last card of the day is Ultima Weapon. For 7 mana, you get legendary artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature attacks, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Equipped creature gets +7/+7, and the equip cost is 7. So I think the only way this is playable is in a deck where you get free attachment of stuff. And we did see the Beatrix from earlier in the previews. So I think those 2 cards are there together so you can attach Ultima Weapon onto Beatrix, and now she's a 11/11. But again, the thing you really need is trample on that, and right now we're not seeing anything that's going to give trample. Alright, so those are our cards from day 3 of Final Fantasy Spoilers. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. I've left some links for other videos in our Final Fantasy preview series. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.